Imagine this. You're sitting across a candlelit table from someone you really, really like. The conversation has been flowing effortlessly for, like, the past 2 hours. The food was absolutely incredible. You're both laughing at a shared joke. And then,
Oh, I know exactly what's coming.
right, the server drops that little black leather folder right in the middle of the table. The check.
Yeah, and suddenly the air just gets incredibly thick.
Exactly. Time completely slows down. You are entering one of the most complex, high-stakes psychological negotiations in modern human interaction, and nobody is saying a single word. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Today, we are looking at why that little black folder isn't just a bill for food and drinks anymore. It has really evolved into the ultimate modern vetting tool for life readiness and equity.
It's so true. I mean, it is a moment every single person who has ever gone on a date recognizes on a visceral level.
100%.
It's that split second where the check arrives, the conversation pauses, and everyone just holds their breath while their brain runs a million calculations. Picture this. You're at the end of like a really great first date.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, so the server drops that little black leather checkbook right on the table, and immediately your heart rate spikes.
Oh, the universal moment of panic.
Right, like do you reach for it? Do you wait for them to reach? Do you offer to split it?
It is the ultimate standoff.
It really is. And here's the wild part. Statistically speaking, there's a nearly 40% chance that you will offer your credit card, but you are secretly hoping the person sitting across from you completely rejects your money.
Which is just, it's such a dizzying psychological dance.
Yes, you're offering, but you actively do not want them to accept. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. In this deep dive, we are decoding the invisible scripts of dating payments.
It's arguably one of the most complex, historically loaded interactions two people can have, over a plate of appetizers.
Totally. And we've pulled together a massive stack of sources to really figure out what's going on here. We've got a sprawling academic study of over 17,000 adults.
Which is a huge sample size, by the way.
Massive. That one is from researchers Frederick and Laver. Plus, we're looking at financial surveys from money.com. We've got psychology blogs, modern etiquette guides, and some really fascinating sociological research from Sage Open.
And I think we should be incredibly clear right up front about something.
Yeah, please.
Because we are digging into the sociology of dating, we are obviously going to be talking a lot about traditional gender roles, sexism, power dynamics, all of that heavy stuff.
Right. And our goal here is not to take a political stance or endorse any of these viewpoints.
Exactly. But we aren't here to tell you how you should run your dating life or, judge anybody's choices.
No, not at all. We are strictly here to impartially unpack the data. We just want to understand the behavioral mechanisms that drive this highly awkward moment.
Which is vital. Because whether you're out there actively dating or you just, love a good sociological puzzle.
Like we do.
Right, like we do. Understanding this dynamic is basically a masterclass in how human beings communicate our deepest values and expectations without ever actually saying a word.
So to really understand the psychology, we kind of have to start with the macro data, because it shows just how universally confused everyone is about the rules.
Oh, the confusion is everywhere.
It's staggering. We have this survey from money.com, and it reveals that 78% of people still believe men should pay on the first date.
78%. I mean, that is a massive anchoring statistic.
It really is.
It basically tells us that despite decades of, massive cultural and economic shifts, the baseline expectation of that traditional script is pretty much untouched.
Right. It's still deeply embedded in the cultural consciousness. And the confusion gets even wilder when you look at the actual dollar amounts people expect to spend.
Oh, the financial bracing.
Yes. So the survey found that the general consensus is a first date should cost somewhere between $25 and $49.
Okay, pretty reasonable.
Sure. But when they isolated just the men's responses, 43% of men expected to shell out $50 to $99.
Wow. So they are mentally and financially bracing themselves to spend double what the general public actually thinks is necessary.
Exactly. They're walking into the date assuming they'll have to pay a premium.
And that financial bracing is really a symptom of a much deeper disconnect between perception and reality.
How so?
Well, to truly understand why men are preparing to overspend, we have to look at the findings of that massive 17,000-person study we mentioned, the one by psychologists David Frederick and Janet Lever.
Right, the one highlighted in the Splitty app research.
Exactly, because having 17,000 adults gives you an incredibly robust, reliable data set. And their findings identified something they call the 27-point gap.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the 27-point gap completely reframed the entire conversation for me.
It really is the defining asymmetry of modern dating. So their research shows that 84% of men report paying for most dates.
84%.
Yeah.
So the vast majority are footing the bill.
Yes. But when they asked the women, only 57% of women said they actually expect men to pay on a first date.
Wait, so you have an almost 30-point gap between the action being performed, the men paying, and the actual expectation of the person sitting across from them.
Precisely. Men are paying way more often than women are actually requiring them to.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it feels like two actors on a stage reading from totally different scripts.
That's a great way to put it.
We live in an era of shared breadwinning, right? In so many households, women are outearning their partners.
Right.
Workplace equality is this massive ongoing cultural focus.
Absolutely.
So if the economic reality of our society has shifted that dramatically, why is this one specific, highly gendered ritual so stagnant? Why hasn't the dating script caught up to the W-2s?
Well, what's fascinating here is a foundational sociological concept known as doing gender. This is heavily discussed in the SAGE open study from our sources.
Doing gender, what does that mean exactly?
Sociologists argue that gender isn't just something you have, it's something you actively perform in social situations.
Ah, okay. Like putting on a show.
Right. And we engage in these performances with a hyper-awareness of how we might be judged by the people around us.
So we're constantly anticipating the audience's reaction.
Exactly. And in the context of a first date, paying the bill is a heavily ingrained way for a man to safely fulfill the traditional provider role.
Safely. I want to zero in on that word.
Yeah.
Are you saying they're paying out of, like, a sense of self-preservation?
Pretty much, yeah. Men who fail to pay or who may be asked to split the bill too early run a massive risk of a negative gender assessment.
Meaning the person they're on a date with might judge them harshly.
Right. They might be perceived as lacking resources, which, is an evolutionary red flag, or they might be seen as lacking romantic interest.
Well, like, he didn't pay, so he must not like me.
Exactly. Or perhaps the most damaging label in that early dating phase, they might just be written off as cheap.
And nobody wants to be the cheap date.
Nobody. So even if a man theoretically believes in total financial equality and he wants an egalitarian partnership, when that check arrives, he often just pays to avoid the risk of that negative assessment.
Wow. He's essentially buying insurance against a bad first impression.
That's exactly what it is.
Because the immediate risk of ruining a genuinely good date is just too high. You aren't going to make some grandstand for modern progressive economics over a plate of nachos.
Right.
Especially not if it means the person you really like walks away thinking you're a jerk.
Precisely. The script stays stagnant because the perceived social rewards of following it are immediate. You look generous, you look capable. Meanwhile, the costs of challenging it in real time are incredibly risky. It's just too socially awkward.
Okay, so if men are paying largely out of this fear of negative judgment, it really begs the question, are women actually judging them that harshly, or are men fighting a ghost here?
Well, the psychology blogs in our research make it pretty clear that women do hold on to this expectation, but it is rarely just about getting a free meal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the transactional value of the food is usually the least important part of the whole equation.
Oh, absolutely. Expecting the other person to pay is basically a deeply symbolic behavioral test.
A test.
Yeah. The sources highlight that for many women, this expectation is rooted in what psychologists call security seeking and a desire for commitment.
So it's a shorthand way of figuring out if this potential partner is reliable, generous, and willing to invest in the relationship's future.
Exactly.
There's actually a really illuminating anecdote in the sources about this. It's about a woman named Emily and her date, Mike.
Oh, right, the Emily and Mike story.
Yeah, and the sources stress that Emily wasn't demanding or entitled in her everyday life. But on her first date with Mike, she made it internally and somewhat externally clear that she expected him to pay.
And her assertiveness there wasn't about the literal cost of the dinner.
Not at all. It was a reflection of her overall approach to setting boundaries. She valued clear communication. She had firm standards for how she wanted to be treated. And that dinner check was just the first tangible opportunity to see if Mike was willing to step up.
Right, it was a behavioral interview masquerading as a dinner date.
Exactly.
But relying on this specific kind of test brings us to a complex academic concept known as benevolent sexism.
Benevolent sexism. How do sociologists define that?
So they define it as attitudes about gender that seem positive or chivalrous on the surface, like holding doors or, paying for meals.
Stuff that looks nice.
Right. But ultimately, these actions reinforce traditional unequal power dynamics where women are viewed as needing protection or needing provision.
Interesting. But a lot of women actively value that chivalry, right?
They do. Many see a man paying as a clear sign of respect, care, and serious intent. But because benevolent sexism relies on an imbalance of power, it creates massive psychological ambiguity at the end of the meal.
And that ambiguity brings us right back to that wild statistic from the top of the deep dive, the offer paradox.
Yes, the paradox. Let's really break down the mechanics of this.
Okay, so the data says 44% of women report that they will offer to pay on a first date.
Right.
But they will get actively annoyed if the man actually accepts their offer. And 39% explicitly state they wish the man would actively reject their money.
It is so wild. You are initiating an action while hoping for the exact opposite outcome.
I keep thinking of this like a psychological CAP-TCHA test.
Oh, like on a website.
Yeah. You know those security checks where you have to click all the pictures of a crosswalk to prove you aren't a robot?
Right.
On a date, you're offering your credit card just to prove you aren't a freeloader. You're signaling, hey, I have the independent means to pay, and I have the baseline politeness to offer.
But you fully expect the other person to click the I got this button.
Yes. If they actually take your card, they fail the test because they failed to perform their end of the chivalrous script.
That is a remarkably accurate way to look at it. The offer is a tool to signal financial independence, but it's simultaneously a trap. It's designed to test the man's adherence to the provider role.
A complete trap.
Yeah, and offering the logically correct answer, yes, let's split it, is actually the wrong emotional outcome for almost 40% of the dating pool.
Wow.
And this precise paradox is exactly why men report feeling so incredibly confused and trapped the second that server approaches the table.
Which transitions us perfectly to the intense emotional pressure happening on the other side of the table. Because we've established the security tests the women are running, but the Sage Open study shows men are dealing with profound internal contradictions.
Oh, the male data here is intense.
It really is. For instance, 76% of men say they feel guilty if they don't pay the bill on a date.
Guilty. That statistic is crucial because guilt is one of the most powerful social regulators we have. Well, it's the emotional mechanism that keeps traditional scripts functioning, even when our logical brains want to move past them. Guilt arises internally when we feel we've violated a deeply ingrained social expectation.
So a man might logically believe, hey, we should split this bill, but the culturally conditioned shame of failing to provide just overrides his modern sensibilities.
Exactly. The guilt punishes him for deviating from the norm.
But wait, is it actually internal moral guilt, or is it just the fear of being rejected? Because the data reveals an impossible trap here.
Let's look at the contradictions.
Okay, so men feel guilty if they don't pay. However, the study also found that 64% of men believe women should contribute to dating expenses.
Right.
And here is the absolute kicker. 44% of men said they would outright stop dating a woman who never offers to pay any expenses.
So they're operating under a mandate to pay while simultaneously harboring a deep resentment if they are forced to do so indefinitely.
It's completely paradoxical. Let me make sure I'm mapping this out correctly. A man feels guilty if he doesn't pay. But almost half of men will dump their date if she doesn't at least offer to pay.
Yep.
Meanwhile, 40% of women are bothered if the man actually accepts the money they just offered.
It's a minefield.
How is anyone supposed to navigate this? If you accept the money, she might be angry. If you refuse the money, you're overriding her stated autonomy. And if she doesn't offer the money at all, you're going to dump her for being entitled.
Yeah.
This sounds absolutely exhausting.
It is exhausting. And this raises an important question. Why put ourselves through this? Sociologists suggest this friction occurs because people are actively trying to undo gender.
Undoing gender.
Yeah. We are in this really messy transitional cultural phase. Both parties want the benefits of progressive equality, but they still rely on those traditional scripts for safety.
I see.
So men want to demonstrate that they're capable and chivalrous at first,
Right.
right? To pass that initial social test and avoid the guilt. But they are secretly using the woman's offer to pay as their own personal litmus test. They want to ensure they aren't dating someone who feels entirely entitled to their resource.
Oh, wow. So the surveillance is totally mutual.
Completely
He's
mutual.
testing to see if he's a reliable provider. He's testing to see if she's an entitled dependent. And all of this high-stakes psychological warfare is happening in total silence while the waiter is just standing there holding a card reader.
Exactly. It's a high-stakes negotiation where neither party is culturally permitted to explicitly state their terms.
Okay, given that the first date is such an emotionally charged trap, how do couples ever actually progress? If everyone is running these secret tests, how do you break out of the cycle?
Well, the sources point to the power of modern etiquette, clear communication, and what the data calls the date to escape route.
I love that name.
But before we discuss date two, we absolutely have to address the elephant in the room, the most significant underlying factor when it comes to the power dynamics of who pays.
Which is the unspoken expectation of physical intimacy.
Yes. The data on this is incredibly stark. 16% of men report that they expect sex if they pay for the date.
16%. That's a very real number.
It is, and this represents the darker transactional side of benevolent sexism. When payment ceases to be a gift of hospitality and instead becomes, a transactional purchase.
It creates a deeply uncomfortable and honestly often coercive sense of obligation.
Exactly. The meal is no longer about connection, it's a down payment.
And the women's data reflects a really clear awareness of that transactional threat, because 32% of women report feeling significantly less pressure for sex if they chip in and help pay the bill.
Right. For a third of women, paying isn't just about modern fairness, it is a defensive strategy.
It's a way to maintain their autonomy, to establish a boundary and clearly communicate, hey, my time and my presence have not been purchased here.
Which is exactly why establishing a fair, logical, modern rule is so crucial for reducing all this anxiety. The modern etiquette guide we looked at from WikiHow offers a very straightforward functional rule for this.
Oh, the whoever asks pays rule.
Yes, whoever asks pays.
That is incredibly clean. It just removes the ambiguity of gender entirely from the equation.
It does. And more importantly, it recasts the entire dynamic. You are no longer operating under those loaded terms of provider and dependent.
Right.
You're operating under the terms of host and guest.
I love that framing.
If I invite you to a specific restaurant, I'm hosting you, and therefore I'm taking responsibility for the hospitality. And the research actually notes that this rule is heavily utilized in queer relationships precisely because it completely circumvents traditional gender norms.
It creates a logical expectation based on action, like who did the inviting rather than identity.
Exactly.
But even with the host and guest rule, I mean, you can't just have one person hosting forever if you want a balanced relationship.
Right, which brings us to the date to escape route.
Yes, because the splitty and lever research shows that while the first date is heavily bound by all this tradition and anxiety, 58% of couples shift to some form of reciprocity by the second date.
And that shift is the crucial indicator that you are moving out of the formal, performative courtship ritual and into an actual partnership.
And the payoff for making that shift early is statistically massive.
Oh, huge.
Couples who establish explicit reciprocity by date 2, meaning they actually verbalize it and say something like, hey, thank you for tonight, I've got the next one, they report 23% higher relationship satisfaction at the 6-month mark.
That is a huge jump in satisfaction. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying mechanics of why that satisfaction increases align perfectly with research by sociologist Susan Sprecher.
Oh, right, the 2001 study.
Yeah. She studied what is called exchange orientation in relationships, basically looking at how partners track what they put into a relationship versus what they get out of it.
Okay.
She found that tracking contributions to ensure fundamental fairness actually strengthens relationships.
It builds trust.
Right.
It ensures neither partner feels taken advantage of, and it fosters a sense of shared effort.
Exactly. However, she also found that tracking contributions to score points or keeping a rigid penny-pinching ledger actively weakens relationships.
So it's this subtle but massive difference between a mindset of, I want to make sure we're both investing equally in this shared experience, versus, you owe me exactly $12.50, for your half of the shared appetizers.
Exactly. The goal is mutual investment and holistic fairness, not transactional accounting.
Which makes perfect sense. We also have to talk about how a completely new generation is rewriting these rules from the ground up.
The generational divide in the data is just staggering.
It really is. According to a Match Group survey in our sources, 31% of Gen Z daters split the bill evenly on a first date.
31%.
Yeah. And compare that to the boomer generation, where only 7% split first dates.
That is a fundamental seismic cultural shift in just a few decades.
Truly.
For Gen Z, it seems that payment equals partnership. Splitting the bill demonstrates a commitment to equality from minute one.
Whereas for older generations, as we've discussed, payment equals provision, security, and serious intent.
Right, and the sources highlight that this isn't just a shift in ideological values. It's heavily driven by a shift in technology.
Oh, totally. Frictionless tech like Venmo or dedicated bill-splitting apps like Splitty have completely removed the logistical awkwardness.
Yeah, you don't have to ask the waiter to bring 4 different checks anymore.
And you don't have to sit there doing mental math with a pen while everyone watches you. You just say, I'll Venmo you, and the friction is entirely gone.
It's a fascinating example of how consumer technology has actually facilitated a sociological shift in dating norms.
Because technology lowers the barrier to entry for equality.
Exactly. When the logistics of sharing are simple and discreet, the progressive behavior just becomes much more common.
We have covered incredible ground today. We've unpacked the 27-point gap, the crazy complexities of the offer paradox.
The psychological CAPTCA test.
Yes. The guilt and the deal breakers trapping men, the defensive strategies of women, and how date 2 serves as the great equalizer.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But ultimately, why should you, the listener, care about the mechanics of a dinner tab?
Because when you're looking at that check, you aren't just doing math.
Right. You are communicating your core values, your personal boundaries, and your long-term relationship expectations. You are showing the other person exactly how you view money, power, and partnership.
It really is the first major financial decision you will make as a potential couple. How a person handles a $50 dinner bill is a surprisingly strong predictor of how they might handle, say, a mortgage discussion or childcare costs, or managing a shared savings account years down the line.
It reveals their fundamental orientation toward sharing resources.
It really does.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from our sources that completely flips this entire deep dive on its head.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
We have spent this whole time agonizing over what to do when the check arrives at the end of the night. But according to research by sociologists Allison and Risman, the real financial negotiation doesn't actually happen at the table.
Nope. It happens before you even leave your house.
That is the ultimate twist. The negotiation is in the planning.
Exactly. The research found that suggesting a high-cost, fancy restaurant versus suggesting an affordable, casual coffee shop is actually an implicit proxy conversation about your budget and your expectations.
So if you invite someone to a really expensive place, you are implicitly signaling either that you are fully willing to pay for it or that you expect them to have the financial means to afford a split at that high price point.
Right. The venue choice is the financial negotiation. You've already had the money talk before you even sat down.
Which is a brilliant practical takeaway for reducing anxiety. If you're worried about the cost, or you want to ensure a stress-free split without triggering anyone's internal paradoxes, just suggest a venue where the financial stakes are exceptionally low.
Let the venue send the signal for you.
So what does this all mean? The next time you are setting up a date, take a second to think about the signals you are sending from the very first text message.
Good advice.
And the next time that server drops that little black leather checkbook on the table, just take a deep breath. Know that the person sitting right across from you is probably just as confused, tested, and anxious about the invisible script as you are.
You aren't just paying a tab.
No.
Yeah.
You're deciding what kind of play you both want to act in.
All right, that's pretty much the breakdown for today. We touched on a few of the big points when it comes to the bill, and hopefully this gives you a better blueprint for your next date. I hope you guys actually enjoyed this episode and found it useful. If you did, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for listening, thanks for hanging out, and I will see you on the next one.